Hello, Gals with No Diet. Betsy Cook Speer here, and as I advertised, I'm very excited. Today we get to hear from Holly Stone, who's a hypnotherapist. And we just chatted briefly, and I said, it's really selfish for me because I've always been very curious about what she does and how powerful it can be. I've been very open about the fact that I have had therapy in my life and what amazing difference it made for me. So I always encourage people to go for it. So this would be another tool that hopefully if you're on a journey and you need to get some insight or some aid, Holly is passionate about what she does. And so I'm going to let her explain a little bit about where she's come from, and then we'll start asking some questions that you've sent in. So thank you, Holly. Thanks again for being here.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for listening. And I think it's, heart on sleeve time. The reason I do what I do is because several years ago, I was in a place where I needed help and I didn't have the answers and I didn't understand why I was feeling the way I did. And in finding the answers, I found myself now with a successful career, something that started with me needing to understand why I wasn't sleeping, why I was having panic attacks, why I was wrought with anxiety. I ended up in A&E thinking I'd had a heart attack, but actually it was just an acute panic attack. And I swore that day that I was going to find out why this was happening. And in doing so, yes, I found myself, several years later with a career that I help other people to overcome not just anxieties, but all sorts of issues. But I never set out to do that. It really was very selfish. I just wanted to fix me. And then I think because I thought I was such a hopeless case and I fixed me, I then thought, well, this obviously helps others. And here I am. I'm now a lecturer and a supervisor, and I do all sorts of other things along those lines and help, lots of people to change their lives, which is the most humbling and inspiring thing to be able to do. So,
fantastic.
yeah.
Fantastic. Holly, as I said, this was also selfish for me because I'm very curious about the process, like how, when your clients come to you and they have an issue, say, about what they're doing in their lives, maybe they're not sleeping well, or they feel really unhealthy and they can't seem to move in the right direction. How do you begin with clients? What do you do?
That's a really big question, but it's a perfect question for me, because one of the things that I think is absolutely crucial in helping people to turn their lives around is giving them the information that explains why they're feeling the way they do, and then most importantly, as a consequence of that, what it is we can do about it. So I'm a solution-focused hypnotherapist, and so I combine all sorts of talk therapies with hypnosis as well to warrant that change. But I'm really passionate whenever I meet a client for the first time. I kind of geek them out a bit, to be honest, and I take them through the neurology of the brain. How does the brain perceive their reality? Why are these things happening to them? Not because of the external stimulation or experiences that they've had, but how this perceives that. Because once you can actually understand how our brains are wired and how they tend to often take control of us and stop us from reaching those goals that we set, then actually we can see what it is we can do to retain our control and get ourselves to where we want to go. So first stop is always explaining the brain. In layman's terms, I have to understand it too, so I've got to be able to explain it in that way, but we explain how the brain works and then look at how we can use that knowledge to make the changes happen for the better.
Okay. Now, the big difference that I've always understood, as a coach myself, I don't look at the past. I look at present and future, actually, where my clients want to go. But as a therapist, you do look at past occurrences and how they've affected the present, correct?
In certain cases, but only in very specific ones. And that's the difference, I think, that makes the difference to the success of what I do personally. And I think I'd just like to caveat, I think what's amazing is that there's different talk therapies for different people. And counselling, for example, does take people back. and dig up the past. And as do some hypnotherapists, I choose, like yourself, to focus on the here, the now, and the future. There are certain exceptions, so extreme traumatic experiences, so post-traumatic disorder, things like that, and specific fears and phobias, then we'll go back and we can kind of make some changes to get rid of those. But those are about the only cases where I'll ever say to a client, let's go back before we move forward. And that is all based on how our brains perceive things, because our brains are infinitely complex, as I'm sure you're aware, but also very, very simple. And they just believe everything we tell them. So if we spend a lot of time going over negative past patterns of behavior, we tend to reinforce them, and we tend to allow the brain to just keep behaving in that same way, and we experience the same negative responses. So we don't do that. We just say, okay, here we are, what's the problem? We understand how the brain perceives that problem, and then we look at the solution to that problem and how we're going to move forward using the brain and using that same knowledge. You know, if we can create the perfect scenario for the future, then the brain tends to believe that too. So we can use the same psychology that I use when I'm working with sports people. You know, sports psychology is very much, you know, it's coaching, it's using the brain and getting it to work for us rather than against us. So that's
fantastic. And so you mentioned that you have other tools. You use the hypnotherapy alongside. What other types of tools do you use? So
talk therapies come in lots of different boxes, don't they? There's counselling, and you know, you name it, you could list probably lots. I tend to specify, I use certain NLP techniques, only certain specific ones.
Can you explain NLP? A lot of people might not even know what that stands for.
So all talk therapy, all of these labels, all of these things that I'm going to kind of just list, and I'm great for acronyms, I get tongue-tied with them, but all talk therapies are basically working on the basis that we are changing neural pathways. We think along pathways, we have little neurons in our brain, and when we have a thought, we join them together, and the more we think that thought, the more they wire together and they get formed into a permanent new positive, in our case, thought pathway that we can follow. So all talk therapies are working on the basis that we are changing pathways. If we've got a negative experience, we're on a negative pathway and we want to create a positive new one. So I just mentioned NLP, that's called neuro-lingual programming. It's a fancy word for changing the pathway. It's changing those little neuron paths and joining. Then you've got cognitive behavioral therapy, exactly the same, changing pathways. And then the one that I think is, you know, the most powerful for me is what I call solution-focused brief therapy. And that is, again, we're changing pathways, but being solution-focused and brief. We're quick, we make changes very quickly. You know, people come to me, some people are, you know, in and out in 3 weeks. You know, it can be longer for other conditions. Okay. But that's the power of not going backwards. If we can be solution focused in our thinking, and it's a relatively modern theory, it came around in the 1980s in the States, but it's really powerful. So that and the other two, with hypnosis, which is just a mental state, a relaxed mental state, helps me to warrant those changes quite effectively and on a long-term basis for my clients. Yeah.
So do you have a couch? Or when you do the hypnotherapy, can you walk us through that, how that works? What, you know, what are we doing?
If behind my screen here, I actually, because of the current COVID crisis, I have a chair and a footstool, and I swapped everything around so that I could keep things hygienic and practical and all those sorts of things. Before that, yeah, I had a couch, but not probably the one that you were thinking of. I have always prided myself in not being clinical. Although I am a clinical hypnotherapist, I've always felt it was really important that my clinic reflected me, and I'm quite relaxed and I'm quite open. So I actually have a little bit like a sitting room area. So the couch was literally a couch. It was a sofa that people could spread out with cushions and put their feet up and just generally feel comfortable. And as I say, the current situation is I have to sit on the couch, so it's no hardship for me. But my clients are unfortunately relegated again, but it's a very comfortable chair where they can
Yeah.
put their feet up. But yeah, I've had to shift things around a little bit to just reflect the current situation and keep everyone safe. But
So
yeah, no, I'm not clinical.
So walk us through it. If you were working with me today, what would you be saying to me, or how would we interact?
Good question. So first meeting for me is always, and this is the interesting bit, so I kind of digress slightly. I don't need to know what my client's problems are in order for me to help them because of the way I work. However, yeah, it's great, isn't it? Sometimes people don't actually know, and I think that's the thing. You know, people just know things aren't right, but they don't really know what's wrong either. So we don't spend a lot of time focusing on the problem per se. But if someone comes in with a specific, you know, they want to lose weight, or, you know, they can't sleep, or they're wrought with anxiety, they're having panic attacks, then it's quite specific, and I can tailor my treatment to that specific condition.
Okay.
But we then will work through actually a very simple formula, because, and this is the bit that clients love, once you see me 1 or 2 times, my clients are 1 step ahead of me. And I like that, because one of the things that our brains don't like is surprises. The minute we chop and change, you know, and move things around unexpectedly, it instantly puts the brain on its defense mechanism. It's like, oh, well, and we've lost a positive change in doing that. So every session that I run is very formulaic, in that I want my clients to almost know what questions coming next. And now it's never quite that, you know, because it's very much, I take my clients as I find them on the day, but it's what's been good in your world today, what's been happening that actually maybe you haven't even considered that was okay. You know, let's steer you away from the problem. I don't say that, by the way, because we don't talk about it. We want to come away from the problem as quickly as possible.
You don't use the P word.
No, we don't use the P word, because the minute we identify a problem, our brain goes into problem thinking. Right. And that's what hinders our ability to actually fix the problem. It's like saying, well, let's identify the problem and we'll put the problem on the shelf over there, and we're going to look at everything else that actually you can do and that will help. But then when we come back to the problem, often it's gone, because we've actually already solved it. The more we focus on it, the worse it tends to get. Okay. So we look at all of the key attributes the clients have got, what's been good, what demonstrates to them that actually, yeah, they've done something this week that maybe they didn't even give themselves some credit for. And then we look at what changes we can make this week, what's going to help get from, I use a very simple scaling system, what's going to help them elevate themselves up that scale today, not to the top, just another notch up on that scale. How are they going to do that? And it has to be something really easy, because as you're, I'm sure, aware in coaching, you know, we need to set goals, but they need to be realistic and they need to be achievable. And in the case of therapy, they need to be almost so easy that we don't have to feel that there's any challenge required at all, because the motivation comes and the positive changes continue when we realize how easy it is for us to achieve the goals that we're setting for ourselves.
So we small do that changes adding up to a big difference.
Absolutely. And I'll often liken it to, I don't know, not that I've ever climbed a mountain, by the way, but I use all sorts of metaphors. But it's saying, you know, what is it going to look like when you're on top of your mountain? But like climbing any mountain, there's base camps. You know, we have to chunk it down. We have to do the training. We have to do the preparation. We have to set ourselves, you know, in the right headspace and get our brain working for us rather than against us before we start that journey. Because otherwise we'll just never achieve it. And then we get frustrated and then we throw the towel in, and then, yeah, we've missed the opportunity. So everything I do is about optimizing the brain's ability to work for us, in the knowledge that the brain tends to like to focus on the problems and all the reasons why we can't do things, because it's just wired that way.
So you're setting them up for success, and you're helping new pathways form in their brain that help them believe that they can succeed, showing them
absolutely.
Forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And understanding that sleep and all of these other things are intrinsically linked into the success of us actually being able to do that.
And Holly, you mentioned that eating disorders is one of your specialties. Can you just briefly say, how you deal with that, or success rate on dealing with that? Because I know that that can be something that is
Well,
always
it's something very
difficult.
close to my heart. It's something that we've had to and still continue to live with in our house with one of my daughters. So
Okay.
it's a very passionate subject for me, and I think it's keeping it simple. So eating disorders obviously continue, it's a very, very big pot, and I would classify that as anything that anybody identifies as a problem relating to food. So it could be
Far and
abstinence.
wide. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be too much, eating too much, binge eating. It could be, orthorexia, down those lines of having to eat healthy foods, but actually it's not healthy because you're deprived. So it covers a myriad of things, but it's recognizing that a lot of the time where food is concerned, we're actually playing with one of the brain's kind of, I suppose, intrinsically wired needs, in that our brain needs to be fed. And this is where a lot of these problems get, really, really tricky, because if we're not feeding our body the right foods, the brain automatically puts itself into a traumatic response, which to keep it quite simple, we've got two key areas in our brain. We've got our conscious rational mind, which sits in our prefrontal cortex, specifically the left area where we are authentically ourselves. And then we've got this wonderful other area that is, wow, it's amazing. It keeps us alive, but it's really, really crude and basic in its makeup. So when it comes to food, if we are hungry, or if we are, hangry, in my case, it happens, we trigger.
Angry?
You heard of the hangry? You get hungry because you're hungry.
That's a great word. I'm going to have to keep that one.
So the minute we have a problem, whether it be, we're hungry, whether it be that we're beating ourselves up because we've just eaten a packet of biscuits, whether it be that we're actually genuinely starving ourselves through malnutrition because we're so controlled, the brain starts to take over, and this primitive response that sits at the kind of in the middle starts to step in. And the minute it steps in, so many perverse responses kind of start to come in. And the first thing that will always happen is, if the primitive emotional response, we call our limbic system, our survival, fight, flight, freeze, that you've probably heard, if that becomes active because we have a problem, the first thing that happens is that our rational control becomes impaired. So it's very difficult for us to maintain a rational, conscious thought process whilst the brain is busy going, but you've got a problem and I've got to help you with it. And it behaves in a very black and white, very crude, very naive way, because it doesn't have an intellect. We are intellectual. We can say, well, I didn't need to eat that biscuit, or actually I should eat a balanced diet, or whatever it is that we can intellectualize. But this primitive response just says, well, last time we thought about this is what we made you do. You're still alive so far, so therefore we'll do more of the same. And it just creates a pattern match that overpowers any rational thought we have. So when food and eating disorders comes in, I am acutely aware that nutrition's key, but equally it's not my position to dictate or tell anyone what they should or shouldn't be doing. Most clients, if not all, know what they want to be doing.
So true.
My job is to just help them to stay in this part of the brain, because then they can do it. Does that answer the question?
It does. No, it's fantastic. I love that. I love your approach and your thought about it. It's in the course that I'm just about to go live with online. It's actually been renamed Diet Ditch Academy. In it, I have a set and forget fooding chart where you set up your protein, fat, and vegetable with every meal, including breakfast, so that like that kind of thing doesn't happen. It's automatic. You've got the foods in your home, so you can grab the good stuff and not run into things like that. So I think that's brilliant. Thanks for describing it that way, Holly.
Did it make sense?
Yeah, it made really good sense, and it really brings it home. I think that's fantastic. I was going to, what was one other, someone saw the bit about your equestrian part and was curious to hear about that, as am I.
Right.
Would you share?
Different.
Yeah, let's go from eating disorders to horses. Let's do it.
Yeah, oh, well, I love performance coaching, and it probably, fall very much kind of tangential with you in that if we, questions are a good one, because there's often a fair bit of fear and a bit of anxiety, often because something's gone wrong, because we're dealing with horses and horses are unpredictable. So once we've overcome the fear, because they've had a fall or something's gone wrong, and we use specific techniques for that, then we say, right, okay, what is it you want to achieve? What do you want to be doing? How do you want to be the best rider that you can be? Because we know that horses respond to, us as riders. We need to be confident, and we need to be calm, and we need to be together. So everything that I'm doing with regard to equestrian coaching is very much, we overcome the fear, we overcome the anxiety, we learn how to harness and control that, and then we really focus on maintaining that calm, focused, mentally rehearsed performance that allows us to retain control throughout. Because if we can retain control, even if our horse doesn't decide to play the game, we're still in the right mindset, and we're still able to maintain that focus without it going out the window and losing it completely. And anyone who has ridden horses will know that it's very easy, the minute something goes wrong, to just go, oh well, that's it then. But if you're in the middle of a cross-country course, or if you're in the middle of a dressage test, and you allow that negative voice to come in, you haven't got a chance of pulling it back. So we just work through all of those sides of things so that we can mentally rehearse maintaining control, overcoming those moments when the horse has a different idea, and how we're going to cope with it better. So I love doing the sports coaching. It's an absolute joy for me, because it's always positive, and it's always future oriented, which is, it's just lovely. And we do a lot of positive visualizations, a lot of mental relaxation, a lot of reinforcing that preferred outcome.
Oh, that's fantastic. And are there other sports that you do coach on, or just the equestrian?
No, I have an array. I've done shot put, lots of golf, bizarrely, lots of golfers. What else have I done? Then we're back into the horse world. I think the horse thing just tends to be, I suppose, when you're in that sort of world, you tend to attract more of the same, don't you? So, yes. But yeah, it's the same theory, it's the same psychology that we use across the board.
Fantastic. Well, let me ask you this before we go. One more question. If you, I know every therapist or coach that I know loves learning, and usually adding something else to their bag of tricks. Is there anything else that you're thinking of maybe adding, something that really is speaking to you?
Oh, that's so interesting. I think at the moment, if I'm honest, I'll probably be the one that doesn't. I run a school, so I train others to do what I do. And at the moment, that's an amazing focus for me. So I'm learning all the time, because I'm lucky enough to be with students who ask questions of me on a constant basis. So although it's kind of sitting within the same bubble, there are always things that I don't know the answer to, which is a joy. So I'm constantly researching, and as an organisation and part of the school, we offer continued professional development and all sorts of courses. So I am learning all the time, even though I'm just delivering that information a lot of the time. Yeah, there's lots of things I'd love to go do. Right now, haven't really got enough time for it, if I'm really honest. But yeah, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks on the beach.
Obviously taking good care of yourself, because you're looking very well.
Oh, thank you.
Could I ask, if people have other questions or they want to contact you, would that be okay?
Of course.
If so, and or learn about your courses and maybe do what you do, how would they find you, or what should they be doing?
The best place to start, and thank you for that opportunity. We've only touched on a tiny part of what it is that we do, but yeah, on my website, so that's hollystonehypnotherapy.co.uk. Everything's there, the links to my training course, to my supervision, all of the things that people would need, you'd find on that website. So that's Holly Stone Hypnotherapy.
Fantastic. And Holly, one more question. It's a pretty international group on the Gals with No Diet. Are you able to work with people worldwide, or are you strictly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've always worked online, but because of the recent COVID, we've had to go 100% online. So I can work anywhere, which is an absolute privilege, and it works really well. I do see clients face to face if they need me to, but yeah. So from that point of view, yeah, anywhere,
Oh,
it's fine.
fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And I learned a lot. So I'm sure that our gals did as well. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. And as I say, very happy to answer any questions and help anyone out if they feel they're stuck with anything.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks. Bye,
Thanks.
gals.